Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sarah. I am a high school biology and now AP Environmental Science teacher here in Texas. And today's video is just going to be all about how I plan my units. And this can apply to any subject, but specifically I'm going to be using my biology honors unit today for an example of how I plan, because I have not quite finished getting through AP Environmental Science Unit 1 yet, but I've broken down how I plan in 6 easy steps. So hopefully this is helpful, and if y'all have any other questions about how I lesson plan, definitely let me know down below and I will answer them as best I can. This is going to be my 4th year teaching. So I taught 7th grade science for 2 years, and then I moved to Texas in October last year and taught biology. So this is going to be year 2 of biology and my first year teaching AP Environmental Science. So let's get into it. If y'all see me looking down, I've got some notes and I have my computer right here in front of me, and I'm gonna screen record what I'm talking about and put it right here so y'all can see too. But the first step to planning out my units is all about timeline. So when are we starting? When is the unit ending? That is the first step every single time. And I would say most districts put out something called a scope and sequence, where they give you the estimated timeline that they want you to be staying on track so that everyone in the district, so all the biology teachers across all campuses, are within the same guidelines. I would say personally, I look at scope and sequences as a guideline and not this has to be the exact amount of days you do, because frankly, we are teaching for different groups of kids and all these different schools. So I would say I never deviate from the scope and sequence in terms of semesters. So like all the topics they say to hit before our first quarterly assessment, I'm gonna hit. And same thing for our QA 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to be on par based off of those quarterly assessments, but I'm not necessarily saying if they say it's gonna be 4 days, I'm going to do this for 4 days. Okay, so I'm gonna put up my district scope and sequence so you can see right here, but you can see that we have our units listed down here on the sides, and it gives the recommended amount of days. So it says for course introductions, it recommends 4 days. Now, my school's on a block schedule, so that's only actually 2 different days with our students. But you can see right here, because we're going to use our first unit as our example, it says cells and viruses. It expects it to be about 8 days ending around the 27th of August. So I'm going to take that into mind as my step 1 for my timelines is, hey, school starts August 12th, and it's expected that we finish this unit by August 27th. So since I taught biology this past year, I do kind of have a better look at how much time different topics need. And something our team decided to do was, in the state of Texas for biology, cell transport is no longer tested on the STAR. So we teach that after STAR in May. But as a team, we decided we still want to touch on this because that foundational understanding of cell transport helps with just building their understanding. And I feel like that is a big thing as a team to discuss, is even if it's not tested, you should be teaching more rigorously than they would be tested. So one of my co-teachers says this, and I think it's a great way to kind of think about it, is basically, I'm going to teach you to this level, I'm going to test you within my class at this level, and then STAR is going to be at this level. So we are teaching you way up here, because by the time STAR is happening in April and all that loss of information that you have throughout the year, because it's a lot of content, is they should still be here well above what STAR is testing them on. So that is our idea of, we should always be teaching to a depth of understanding for our students to just get more out of a class. And that is why we decided as a team, we're pushing cell transport to cells and viruses, because we feel like it makes more sense there. So now our district recommended the 27th, but since we're adding in a later unit here at the beginning, we decided we wanted to take a little bit more time. So this is my team's planning calendar. So I made this in sheets where I just put in the calendar of our school district. So I went and I organized it by our red days and blue days because we're on block. I put in every single day we're off and everything so that we can get a picture of our school year based off of our personal calendar. And then on the right side, you'll see that I have more so the specific agenda items. So because my team decided we are going to add in some later content into this first unit, we're deviating a little bit from the scope and sequence, which we don't always do, but we decided that we wanted our first test to be September 2nd, as you can see down here. So the district recommended the 27th, but we're pushing it back by a week. And we're doing that because if we add in this information now, it actually makes our next unit a little shorter than the district recommends because we're putting it in our unit 1. So it all works out in timing. We still are going to hit all 3 units within the first quarterly assessment window, and that's perfectly fine. So we've decided as a team, we want September 2nd to be our first test because also the 28th right here, I don't have it on the calendar, but that is a blockout day. So we're gonna have a football game and a pep rally on the 27th, which our football games in high school and Texas go very late. A lot of students will not be getting home until well past midnight those days. So we are not allowed to give any major grades on the 28th. That's called a blackout date for our school. So because of that, we knew we couldn't be giving the date on the suggested day anyways, and that's why we're also moving to the next week. So when you're looking at your timeline, you need to think about what content needs to be covered within that given window. You need to also think about things happening at school that adjust your schedule. So pep rallies and anything else of the sort that may be happening. Maybe it's a homeroom day, so you have shortened classes. Whatever it is, I'd recommend just throwing it in a calendar kind of like this so you can visually see what's going on within that month of that unit. So that is step 1, is all about your timeline, okay? So once we decide this is the day the unit starts and this is the day it ends, that's set in stone, and no matter what happens, we are going to try to stick to that test date, because once you move a test date back, you are now going to be adjusting everything else for the rest of the year. So we would rather cut out a day within the unit than move a test back. So stick firm with those dates that you set within your timelines. And as a team with honors and level, we've basically already decided what days our tests are gonna be throughout the entire first semester. And that way, if students are in honors and they want to drop down to level, they're not missing any content because we test on the same day. And same thing, last year we had some level kids move up to honors because they were performing at hundreds for those first 2 tests. So then they get to move into honors without missing any content. So if you are on any teams like that where you have a PLC, highly recommend keeping your test similar across the board to keep vertical alignment. But that is step 1 of unit planning. Now onto step 2 of how I lesson plan is all about, now what are you actually teaching? So in Texas, our standards are called TEKS. So we have something called the TEKS guide, which I find very, very helpful. So if you're also in Texas, I highly recommend you going to this website. If you didn't know it existed, it's literally just Google TEKS guide. I think it's teksguide.org as the actual website. But this is what the website looks like when you open it up, and you are going to select your subject. So we're doing science, and then we are biology, and you hit search. And then it's going to pull up every single one of your standards, including like the science practices and skills that they expect, which are our first like 4 TEKS. And then we get into our actual like content TEKS. So for our first unit, we have 5B and 5D as our 2 main TEKS. And I mentioned we're bringing in some extra information, so we are also testing them on 5C. So we have 3 different TEKS we're testing on within our first unit. So now that we have what our timeline is, we need to know what we're teaching. So within this website, it's really cool. You can click into your thing and it will give you definitions. And what's really helpful are these detailed explanations. So it tells you when it says scientific explanations for cellular complexity, what is encompassed within that. So it is saying they need to understand that organisms don't have an innate tendency to evolve towards complexity. The prokaryotic cells existed before eukaryotic cells, so we are teaching them endosymbiotic theory. And that is the depth. And then you can see also here, they're expected to compare and contrast pro and eu. Within, you can see it gives the definition. So they need to know that prokaryotes are no nucleus or major membrane-bound organelles, so no mitochondria or chloroplasts are in them. Same thing for eukaryote. And then if you go lower, you can see it has more specific definitions for helping, and there is some supporting information here as well. This is the TEACS guide. We go through every single one of our TEACS per unit and break down what the TEA says our students need to know within that TEAC. Now, as I said, I'm gonna teach them more than what is in this TEAC because I teach honors, but also our level students are also getting more than the TEAC because you can't teach just to the TEAC and expect them to be able to answer every single question on STAR when those fluff scientific vocabulary get thrown into the test because they weren't exposed to it. So we love to overexpose them to the information, as I said. But this is step 2, is now what do they actually need to know? Step 3 is to now build your unit test. So I always start with the unit test and we are pulling TEAC aligned questions. We're having past STAR questions on our test. We expect them to be able to answer these very high Bloom taxonomy questions on the test. Most of the time we are not asking them DOK 1s, we're at the 2 or 3 level when we're testing them. And that is to help prepare them for STAR, which is going to be 42 questions, no DOK 1s. So we are making sure our tests are STAR aligned. That being said, my district uses Eduphoria as our testing software. So they have a item bank built within, so you can just organize it by TEAC and pull in questions. So as a team, we basically pulled our favorite questions that we felt like covered all aspects of every single TEAC. And I didn't mention this, but within Texas, we have readiness standards and supporting standards. So readiness are our big boys. Those are the ones that are going to be highly tested on STAR, and then supporting are not as much with testing. So you're supposed to focus a little bit more on the readiness. So our tests frequently are about maybe 60-40, sometimes 70-30, with that higher percentage of questions being from our readiness TEAC and that lower percentage being our supporting TEACs. But we always make sure every single TEAC is represented within the test. And for our first test, honor students are taking a 30 question test with 1 written response. Level is taking 25 questions with 1 written response. So they're very similar for our first unit, and our goal is we build them up to more questions as we progress through the year. For honors, our goal is to be giving them tests that are over 40 questions, so then when they get to STAR, they're like, this is nothing, okay? So step 3 is you're gonna build your test. At my school, our tests have to be the exact same with every single teacher. So we meet for a PLC, and as a team, we build out our test. So honors built their test first, and then level made it a little simpler. They took out some of the questions from honors and they added in a few DOK 1s in replace of some of the DOK 3s that the honors test had. Which, if I didn't say this, DOK means depth of knowledge. So 1 is you're just recalling information. It's like do you know this definition, what vocab goes to that word? DOK 2 is a little bit more with the application of information, and DOK 3 is the highest depth of knowledge they can get. Normally those are going to be like your written response questions where they're really having to formulate their own verbiage to answer those questions. So that's what I mean by DOK. You want a healthy amount of all of it because it really tells you, hey, where did you lose students throughout the unit? So step 3 is build your test. I recommend you do that with your team. And when you start by building a test and then planning your unit, that's called backward design, which I am a very big fan of, because how do you know what to teach them if you don't know what you're assessing them on? So starting with the assessment and then going backwards to plan out your unit is by far my favorite way to lesson plan. Step 4 is kind of a lot of thinking and not a lot of work per se. It is now building your outline for the entire unit. So going back to our lesson planning calendar, we have now learned that in step 1, we know our timeline. We have set that our test is going to be on September 2nd. We know the first day of school is August 12th. So we have that start and end date of our unit. Now we need to decide, what are we doing in the middle? So we do this by first knowing kind of what's going on with our schedule. So on our first day of school, which is August 12th, there's going to be a very large amount of the day where you're sitting with your homeroom students and teaching them about the school and all things like that. So you don't get a lot of time with that first group of students. So as a team, we've decided that first day is just going to kind of be more so of a free day per se, and we're going to officially start on the 13th. So we are kind of flipping things where blue is our first day and then red is second day of content. So we obviously do the same thing 2 days in a row because we're on AB block, which is very nice. So that's why you can see my schedule has these blockings under the red and blue. So we've added in, this is day 1 of our unit and this is my test. Now we know we have 3 different TEKs to hit within this. And also within our first unit, we review safety within the class because biology does have a lot of labs. We do microscope work and things like that. So our first unit has things that are beyond just the normal content, and that's another reason we went a little farther than the recommended end date. So we are going to do some back to school stations. This is when they're going to be getting their syllabus. You're going to teach them the classroom procedures. We're going to go over safety information that day for notes. And that is our first day of school. So we call those the back to school stations. And we know, no matter what, at the beginning of the school year, that's going to be our first day of the unit is back to school info. Then we know, hey, did they actually learn anything? So we are going to quiz them on the safety information. They're going to turn in their safety contract, their syllabus signature, and then they're just going to take a quick safety quiz. And then we're going to start the real content of the unit. So right here on our August 17th, 18th, that's like our real content now. So we know we need to cover cells in general. We need to review eukaryotic versus prokaryotic. We need to teach them the endosymbiotic theory. We need to teach them cell transport, which has passive and active. So that's kind of a lot of information. And then we also need to teach them viruses. And we would love to do a lab in there as well. So we've got 6 main things that we kind of want to hit within our unit. So going back to our calendar, you can see we kind of break things up just like that. We're going to start by teaching them our cells, and then in the end of 8th grade, they learned the organelles of the cell. So we're going to quickly review that because they need to understand how these different organelles work for the rest of the year. But cell organelles is not technically a TEK because they're expected to just know it already. So make sure you're looking at the previous year's information as well, because I know for a fact I'm gonna have to recover these organelles with the students so they know them to the depth I want them. So we're gonna do a little bit of organelle review as well. And then we're gonna have our big lab. So every unit we like to have one large lab that takes up a full 90 minutes. That's gonna be our microscope lab. Within that, they're going to look at cheek cells, so animal cells, and they're gonna look at some onion cells for plant cells. Then we're gonna hop back into content. So we need to finish out our cell information. So now endosymbiotic theory. And then we're gonna cover viruses for a day. And then our last 2 days are splitting up cell transport. So now that we've kind of have this outline of splitting up those main topics by day, we get to move in to the next part. So step 4 is really, we set out the outline of, we know this is day 1, this is test. What do we need within all these days? Something else to keep in mind is within honors as a team, we've decided we don't want to give them review days in class. We teach them up to the test day. You can see I have it says review, but that's more so if we finish the activity, that's what they can do with the remainder of class that day. But we do not give a full day for test review in our units. But in our level classes, they give a full test review day before every test. So they are now one class less than honors. So that is how honors actually gets to go a little deeper in our information, is by cutting out those test review days. That's how we kind of plan out the outline of what needs to happen what day. We've made it to step 5 of lesson planning. So for step 5, this is now kind of the fun part of deciding what are we actually gonna do with our students in each class. So from the last step, we know the outline. So day 1, we need to teach them the parts of the cell. We're gonna review organelles. So we know that as a broad concept of what we wanna cover. Now, step 5 is go find the resources. So for me, I am very lucky in the sense that my teacher that I was working with last year, she unfortunately is moving to another school, but last year she has accumulated so many amazing resources over the 30 years she's been working, and she shared all of them with me before she left the school. So I have a very large folder of materials that I get to use with planning, but some of our newer items are going to be from like the trendy science teacher. I really like her materials. And then I also am a very big browser of TPT. So I will always be kind of looking for other resources to keep things better. But that being said, the resources that are available to y'all are going to be different for each lesson of what you have. So we have a textbook, but we really don't have a curriculum in my district. Our district kind of says like, here's a few resources here and there, but they don't have this is what you do on day 1. In Louisiana, we had a full-blown curriculum for 7th grade science. We used Amplify. So we really didn't need to do this step of pulling resources because the curriculum already had them. So this would be a good point of just making sure you reach out to your school or team. So if this is your first time teaching ever, or you're moving subjects or something, definitely reach out to your team before buying or doing anything, because you have no idea what they're already going to have and if there is a curriculum. So you can see this is my Google folder, and we're doing unit 1. So when you click into here, I have everything organized by day already, but we have all of our resources that we could possibly pull in one folder. And then we decided, hey, day 1 is a safety quiz. We're gonna intro cells and do organelle review. So within it, I have these different materials. So we're going to do a prokaryotic and eukaryotic Venn diagram. We're going to do our cell organelle review worksheet, which we'll have them post into their notebook. I have a card sort that they can do. So we're gonna cut those out and let them match those. And then I have a quiz for them to do for safety. So you can see all of our resources are now organized within the folder, and we've just pulled them into the different spots. So we break it down by day right here. And then you can see I made these notes. So obviously we start each day with, we're gonna do a little bit of notes and then we do an activity. I never lecture for more than 20 minutes of our 90-minute block because they are going to fall asleep on me if I talk for that long. So I keep our notes kind of simple, where I made this Cornell style note sheet where it gives the guided question, and then I just have some pictures and diagrams posted within them for helping them, because I feel like that's the hardest part of notes, is you don't have the visuals that I'm showing on the PowerPoint. So I like to print out the visuals at minimum for my students, and then I expect them to do a majority of the heavy writing along with it. So I've also made like my slideshow. So this is my Unit 1 slideshow that I made to go with my notes. So it has the different sections. I break it down by part. So each of these parts are different days within our unit that I'm going to be lecturing. So like day 1, I'm going to do cell theory and cells. And then day 2 is our microscope lab. And then we'll do viruses. Then we'll do cell membrane and cell transport for those last few days. So you can just get an idea of kind of how I break things up. I'm big on, I add extra information onto the slides, and I'm big on pictures to help them. Step 5 is to pull the main resources you want. I personally like a good, you do generalized notes, and then you're gonna do an activity to make them go deeper with a hands-on aspect. So whether that is a lab or it's a card sort or something like that, I feel like at times we can get lost in just lecturing to give them all the information, but especially in a 90-minute block, they need a break to step away from you just lecturing them. So that is step 5, is to pull your resources and just organize them by day. So we know what we're doing each day. We need something that's gonna fill about 60 minutes, because every day I'm gonna do a bell ringer for the first 10 minutes. I'm gonna lecture for about 20 minutes. So I need an hour worth of activities that reinforce those ideas. And finally, step 6, this is the nitty-gritty stage. So now that we know exactly what we're doing each day, you need to make all of the things you kind of overlook. So for me, that is, you're gonna need a daily slideshow. So I showed y'all my note slides previously, but I'm also gonna have a daily slideshow. This is gonna include a daily bell ringer, and it's going to say, okay, we're gonna go do our notes, but now we're gonna do this activity. So it has instructions built within those daily slides, and it keeps me on top of what we need to do also, because the 4th time you've done it, sometimes you're just like, wait, where am I in this? So you need your slideshows, you're gonna need your notes. So I showed y'all my guided notes, but there are tons of different ways people do notes. You're going to need to update your Canvas. So my school uses Canvas. In Louisiana, we used Google Classroom, and I'm actually pretty proud of how I organized my current Canvas. Last school year's Canvas kind of was a little wonky because it was my first time using it, and Canvas is a little harder than Google Classroom in my opinion, but there's so much more customization you can do, which I really like. So I'm gonna show y'all just a little sneak peek about how I've organized my Canvas. I keep everything for my unit within the modules. So you can see here, we've got Unit 1, and I have Unit 1 fully built out already for biology, which is very nice. So we're just gonna start at the top. So I have that planning calendar that we use. I made a very similar version for my students, so they can see our calendar. It's linked to the different pages within Canvas. So if they click this, it brings them to that page in Canvas. I haven't done all the links because this is just our master course. I'll have to make a copy of this Canvas information that I've made into the one that my students are loaded into. So that's why not everything is 100% filled in links wise, because the links will change once it's my personal classroom. And then off to the side here, I just have their grades based on the day. So they know, hey, I was absent on the 21st. we did the organelle quiz and we worked on our storyboard. That's a daily grade. So they can just see all of that information right there on the first page. Then this is how I organize my days. So you can see it says Unit 1, Lesson 1, and it has the dates because I'm blue-red calendar. So those, my blue day students, August 13th, red day students, August 14th. And then every single day we have a bell ringer. I'm going to insert like a little screenshot of it once I make them. And then it says what notes, our activity, and their homework at the end of that class. And I have a little legend down here. I would say the next day is a better understanding of what typically they look like. So this is what a normal little outline will look like. So the first thing we're gonna do is a safety quiz, which has a little star. So that means it's daily grade, and then their bell ringer. And then we're gonna do notes. So the notes page is linked so they can open up the copy of what we did. And then my slides for just that part, so only part 1 slides are going to be listed. And then you can see we have our practice. So we're gonna do this Venn diagram. We'll do an organelle review, and then we're gonna do the card sort. Because the card sort's just an in-class activity, I also have the answer key posted here so students at home can use it as a study material as well. So then you can see we've got like the little boom emoji right there, which means that is going to be a double daily grade. So we have our organelle quiz coming up on the 21st and 24th. So this is how every single day is going to be outlined for them. For the units, I have everything organized. I have the materials linked for them. So if they're absent, they can see exactly what we did. At the bottom of each unit, I have the study materials kind of already laid out. So you can see I have all the notes here. I'm gonna have my copy of my notebook linked here. I have the different Amoeba Sister videos linked, and then I normally make a booklet. And then we also have to do retests. So this is how I kind of organize my retest information, which y'all can pause it and read that if y'all would like. And then another part of the nitty gritty is copies. Another big thing for science that may not relate to other class periods is when you're pulling all those resources and you're doing the nitty gritty is you probably will have to make a lab supply list. So for us, we're doing the microscope lab, so we need to make sure we have enough onion cell slides and cheek slides, and we also do cotton balls so they can see the thread under there, so we need to buy cotton balls and everything like that. We're also doing something called excellent osmosis, and that lab you need cups and eggs and syrup and vinegar, and that is materials that we need to tell our school in advance, like, hey, we need these things for these days. That is basically how I plan my units. So I would say, just as a few like helpful tips and tricks for me, is it gets easier with time. I promise it does. The first time you're gonna teach something, it's gonna feel so overwhelming. What I recommend for the first time, so I'm going through this with AP Environmental Science right now, is I needed to write it down. I'm a big digital person, but there's something so nice about being able to see what you're doing each day for the first time. So I am just going in for AP Environmental Science and writing what I need to do each day with the students. So, and I'm writing it all digitally as well, but this is kind of how I am helping keep my brain on track of, do I have absolutely everything done to teach this class? And then I move on to the next day. So that's my first tip, is if you are like me, like I was starting to get a little overwhelmed with the amount of things I felt like I needed to do, taking a second to write it down just for the first time of getting through it is very beneficial. Another thing is I am a go-getter. I want to be planning for our next school year right now, and it's June, but sometimes you do need to take a second and wait until you have the opportunity to meet with your team, because if they've been doing this, it's going to be so much more helpful to kind of follow someone's lead, or if you have a curriculum, follow the curriculum with fidelity that first year. Okay, so for me in Louisiana with Amplify, our very first school year, we followed it with fidelity for about the first 3 units when we felt like we got it under our belt. And then that's when I started being able to get a little bit more like, hey, I want to add my personal teaching style into the class. But following what you've been given for those first few units, maybe give it the first 9 weeks, makes things so much more easier than letting yourself get overwhelmed with everything. Another thing is at the beginning of the year, it is so important to be setting those classroom procedures and expectations that you should give it the time it needs to be given. Even in high school, like I'm going to spend at least 30 minutes on that first day with them going over my expectations. If you don't have a pencil, what do you do? And it feels so silly to have something for each one of those, but you're gonna save yourself so much if you plan those little things out now. Like, how do we turn in our work? How do I deal with missing work that's been turned in late? So makeup work. And for me personally, what I find that works is I set up a Google form, and if they turn in something past the original due date, they need to go fill in that form. And that helps me have a running list of things I need to go do, because a lot of assignments are turned in digitally, so I would never go check that one assignment again unless I'm reminded that, hey, that one kid was asked, I need to go check that they submitted it now. So having just these generalized procedures is going to be such a big deal at the beginning of the year that you need to have given the time to go through. I'm even doing it with my seniors for AP environmental science. We are going to sit and we're going to talk about how I expect my classroom to run. And a part of me feels like, hey, this is kind of childish, but it helps so much because they all need to know what your expectations are, because that's your classroom. They're gonna go leave and go to 7 other classes over their schedule, and each teacher is gonna do things differently. So you can't assume they know how to handle something, because maybe one teacher just lets them go to the bathroom whenever they want. But like, I need them to ask me before they can go. Not that I'm gonna say no, it's just I need to know who's out of my room. So that is why you can't assume, you gotta just say it. But that is a wrap of how I plan my units. I know this was very chatty and probably a little bit long, but thank you if you've stayed this far into the video. And if you have any other questions about how I personally plan, I'm definitely in the thick of it right now for APES with having never taught it. So I'm in the middle of learning from scratch again how to plan out our stuff. That being said, thank y'all so much for being here for this one. I hope y'all give it a like and subscribe to stay for more teacher content, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.